The Popcorn Boys are back! That's right, Flood baby! Flood lore! The next season of Halo Infinite is gonna be Flood themed, and it has come with it was a small lore drop, but it was still huge in significance, and I can't resist talking about the Flood! My boys are back! Hopefully not as a random seasonal gimmick. Now, today I'm going to talk about the Flood and the UNSC's protocols to deal with it. Simply put, the smallest outbreak can push the galaxy to its limits, and this has shaped humanity's approach to dealing with the parasite. Also, a quick note for all of you, I have a link tree down below that leads to my Discord, Patreon, Instagram, Twitter, I refuse to call it X, and a gaming channel. Everything I have, you can find it down below. Plus, a like and a subscribe would be nice too. Alright, let's just do this. Let's get right into this. I am so excited. The UNSC has had a handful of entanglements with the Flood. Each fight has been costly, resulting in the near total loss of the forces involved. Victory has only ever been achieved through drastic and horrifically destructive action. While the crew of the Spirit of Fire was the UNSC's first engagement with the galaxy-ending parasite, the first reported encounter was in 2552 on Installation 04. Although you can see the outbreak in all its horror from the perspective of the Master Chief in Halo Combat Evolved, the novel The Flood really underscores how utterly horrific that particular outbreak was. In fact, we got multiple first-hand depictions of what it was like to be incorporated into the parasite's collective biomass. Keyes floated in a vacuum. A gauzy white haze clouded his vision, though he could occasionally make out images in lightning-fast bursts. A nightmare tableau of misshapen bodies and writhing tentacles. A muted gleam of light glinted from some highly polished engraved metal. In the distance he could hear a droning buzz. It had an odd musical quality, like Gregorian chants slowed to a fraction of its normal speed. He realized with a start that the images were from his own eyes. The knowledge brought back a flood of memory of his own body. He struggled, and realized in mounting horror that he could just barely feel his own arms. They seemed softer somehow, as if filled with a spongy, thick liquid. He couldn't move, his lungs itched, and the effort of breathing hurt. The strange, droning chant suddenly sped into an insect buzz, painfully echoing through his consciousness. There was something distant, something definitively other about the sound. Without warning, a new image flashed across his mind, like images on a video screen. The sun was setting over the Pacific, and a trio of gulls wheeled overhead. He smelled salt air and felt gritty sand between his toes. He felt a sickening sensation, a feeling of indescribable violation, and the comforting image vanished. He tried to remember what he was seeing, but the memory faded like smoke. All he could feel now was a sense of loss. Something had been taken from him, but what? The insistent buzz returned, painfully loud now. He could sense tendrils of awareness, hungry for data, wriggling through his confused mind like diseased maggots. A host of new images filled him. The first time he killed another human being, during the riots on Charybdis 9. He smelled blood, and his hands shook as he holstered the pistol. He could feel the heat of the weapon's barrel. The pride he felt after graduating at the academy, then a hitch, as if a bad holorecord was being scrolled back. Then a knot in his gut, fear that he wouldn't be able to meet the Academy's standards. The sickening smell of lilacs and lilies as he stood over his father's coffin. Keyes continued to float, mesmerized by the parade of memories that began to pile on him, each one appearing faster than the last. He drifted through the fog. He didn't notice, or indeed care, that as soon as the bursts of memory ended, they disappeared entirely. The strange otherness receded from his awareness, but not entirely. He could still sense the other probing him, but he ignored it. The next burst of memory passed, then another, then another. Even after the destruction of Installation 04, the UNSC would have more encounters with the Flood. The entirety of the In Amber-Clad's crew, save for a select few, all of High Charity, and a sizable portion of Installation 05 would be hungrily devoured mere months later. In fact, the Flood would have gone on to devour nearly all, or worse, the entirety of the galaxy for the second time were it not for the UNSC Sangheili Coalition's actions on Earth and the Ark. Just for reference of how bad things got, in Halo 3 when Lord Hood says, "glassed half a continent," he was being very literal. Of course, there were other incidents that happened beyond the games. The Mona Lisa incident was a disastrous attempt by Oni to weaponize the Flood. Honestly, go watch Halo Evolution's The Mona Lisa if you can stomach body horror and serious levels of gore. It presents a brutal and unapologetic take on the Flood that the games were just unable to show, be it due to restraint or technical limitations. The point is, the UNSC understood from then on it was completely incapable of countering the Flood effectively. Voy is the best example. The UNSC response to the Flood was actually very quick and effective in the opening seconds. As demonstrated within Halo Mythos and beyond, the opening minutes of the outbreak on Earth were met with a ruthless response. Perimeters consisting of everything from ODSTs to the best the Marines could scrounge up were set up. The Flood dismantled everything sent at it almost immediately and overran every single position. That is why half of Africa was glassed by the Sangheili. For that matter, if a pandemic were to break out, there would be no way of combating the Flood outside of going to one of the Halo rings and purging swaths of the galaxy once again. The Forerunners had tried and failed to fight the Flood conventionally. See my How a Galaxy Fell video for more on that. The UNSC would fare no better in the event of a large outbreak. So, humanity's entire strategy has followed a philosophy of prevention at any and all costs available to it. This is a philosophy that has been adopted by pretty much every faction with even a remote knowledge of the Flood. Simply put, the UNSC's goal has been to find any and all remnants of the Flood, primarily those contained within Forerunner facilities, and keep it there. The UNSC may not be able to deal with a large outbreak, but as shown by John 117, Spartans are the most effective means of combating the Flood without using weapons of mass destruction. I should note, however, that Spartans are not the be-all, end-all. In fact, Spartans are still very, very vulnerable to the Flood, and I cannot emphasize this enough. Remember, this parasite was wrangling Forerunner warrior servants back in the day. Spartans are exceptional and have proven themselves beyond capable in punching well above their weight class, so to speak. But they are not going to dominate the Flood. It takes very special individuals to be willing to not only face the physical toll, but the mental hell as well. And going back to the Master Chief, I should note, John got lucky. He says as much himself, others say so, and even then, he was pushed to the absolute breaking point every single time. Moving on, anti-parasite training is an intensive and selective process. Although Flood containment fire teams consist of Spartan 4s who voluntarily taken up that role, the UNSC is very picky about who they choose to bring into the fold. Not everyone is able to handle the mental strain of witnessing the Flood transform bodies and landscapes. The last thing that is needed is a member of a Spartan fire team breaking down in the midst of combat. It isn't just the prospect of Flood infection that will deliver exorbitant amounts of stress to operatives. In fact, anyone sent to contain the Flood have to make peace with the fact that their own commanders can and will make the decision to kill them and their team if needed. Even the very armor they wear could and will end their lives in an instant. The gallows visor, which is part of the helmet used by some Flood containment teams, is literally rigged to explode in the case of a breach. In other words, if your armor is compromised, the visor will literally make your head and helmet blow up. And if something goes wrong, there will always be a vessel in orbit that will bombard your position so completely and utterly there will be nothing left of you or the parasite to find. Spartans are also not allowed to assist in the collection of samples. They are also forbidden from helping anyone who has been potentially infected with the Flood supercell. In other words, if your town is overrun by the Flood and you see a Spartan, they're not there to help you. There are other units that may assist in Flood containment. As an example, the Hazop Cyclops can be deployed to quarantine zones for the destruction of Flood forms or the collection of samples. These suits are not reused, rather they are destroyed immediately after their mission is completed. In the event of contact with the Flood, Emergency Biohazard Response Upsilon is to be activated immediately. From that point on, rules of engagement go out the window. Any act, no matter how cruel or cold, will be committed if it means containment. Spartan fire teams are meant to be deployed to assist with that containment and inevitable clearing. However, in the event of a Spartan casualty to the Flood, the Corruptor Protocol is to be enacted. In other words, if a Spartan has been infected and safeguards to deny the parasite a body fails, any and all Spartan fire teams are to immediately pull back as far as they reasonably can. In some cases, they may be tasked with retreating to a set area or a perimeter. The reason? The UNSC Navy vessels in orbit will use any and all means at their disposal to eradicate the Flood, specifically the infected Spartan. This includes magnetic accelerator cannons and the most powerful nuclear warheads the UNSC can field. And this is for good reason. Not only will the Flood have access to, well, all of the knowledge the Spartan has, so that includes how to operate vehicles, intelligence, etc. You also have a super soldier in power armor, bolstered by the nature of the Flood, running around on the field. Not many things are going to be able to deal with that. Now, recently Halo lore has had its first official instance of Corruptor being put into place. An area known as Site 22 had a Flood outbreak and the Spartans present were either forced to withdraw or lost. The UNSC Saturn declared Corruptor and gave all ground forces 7 minutes to get as far as humanly possible. Given Halo Infinite is going to be Flood themed for the next 3 months, this will be fun to see where it goes. That said, that is all for today. I will see you in the cosmos, friends.